Hello? Sorry, I actually fell asleep. Yeah, but I'm awake. Yeah. Did you actually listen to all the messages? Yeah. Now, right, I'm going to tell you now. Because I'm from a Jewish background, the word Britain is similar to like Uzbekistan. Then there is Pakistan. Tan comes from the word Eden, means garden or land, beautiful land. Then there is the word Berit. Now, the Berit means land of the covenant. Covenant, Berit, you can find in the Old Testament. It means like holy land. Then when you say Lon Ton, Tan means garden, and then it's the city of Lon. Now, if you're going to use Arabic, let's pretend you live in Baghdad. Yeah, then you will turn around and call it Bab Elon. Bab means the door. The door of Lon, Garden of Lon, would be called Babylon. So actually, most people have no idea what's going on in history. Now, Maha means great in Sanskrit. Yes, then Med is the second word. Medi means like the sweet one. Even in modern Hindi. That's why one of their most famous actors, who was the king of Bollywood until the 1990s, was called Amitabh Bachchan. Mita. Yeah, Mita, to them it means the sweet one. Yeah, the sweet or beautiful one. So Mahamed means the greatest sweet. It's just a title. It is not a name. Now, the character Maimonides was created actually by British companies, and there's evidence to show that the Royal Society of London and other societies in France were involved with this. There was a man called Jean-Louis Boukhadrat. Yeah, he was a Turkish Arabic person. When I say Turkish Arabic, is because those lands were linked together at the time. Yeah, same like England had a relationship with the United States a lot more in the past, until the so-called independence. Yeah, so the thing is, this Jean-Louis Boukhadrat, he went around the Middle East, especially in Egypt and in Syria, and he was giving out books written in Arabic. And those books were supposedly about a guy called Mehmed, or Mehmed, or Mohammed in Arabic. Yeah, or Mohammed in British, or in French, Mahomet. You know, some of the French documents write about it in the 18th century. So they were talking about this guy, and they were stealing his character. Same like the character of Jesus was stolen by the Roman Catholics and the Buddhists. Yeah, did you read my books about how the character of Jesus Christ was put into Christianity and into Buddhism? Yeah, but the thing is, in my books, you will notice that I put down the clear evidence that researchers have shown. I just put a summary, yeah, that they've shown that there was a character. Call him Jesus if you want in English. I'm going to use the English language. A man like that did exist, and he was part of the resistance to a country. Call it Tataria if you want, or whatever you want to call it. He was part of the resistance against the group of rulers there. He was just a revolutionary, like you could say, like Che Guevara. I'm not sure if Che Guevara's story has been exaggerated, but from what we know about Che Guevara, according to the mainstream media, he was a revolutionary. He was fighting for a cause. Now, Jesus Christ was fighting for a cause. Yeah, and then because he became so famous that you know, they meddled with his story. Then there was that man called Mahomet, you could say, in France. Yeah, so there was that character. So they stole his character too. In Judaism, he's become Mehmed or Maimonides, according to Wikipedia. In Buddhism, he's become Mahamod Galyayanan. Yeah, you know, with a strange surname. But don't forget, people didn't have exact surnames in them days, but Wikipedia uses the name Mahamod Galyananan, which is just simple, Mahamod yeah, Galilean, and one of the successors of Jesus Christ, or the people in Buddhism after that. Now in Islam, we've got the person who takes over after Jesus Christ is a gentleman named Muhammad. It's a bit obvious these three people are the same person, and their character has been, played. These characters have been played around with. Now they've been played around with, so it's just as simple as that. If you've got any questions, ask me now, because I've given you a summary after many, many years of looking into this. This is what I've given you, a summary. But you've obviously got some questions because, I don't know, you probably find it hard to believe unless if you have a look at, what researchers present. You've got to have a look at it. Like Fomenko, actually, for example, he shows this character, turns up in Egypt, Arabic Egypt, mysteriously 500 years ago, just turns up out of the blue, and it just doesn't fit into the historical timeline. So, you could have a look at his books. He talks about it too. Any questions?
Maybe more formally, I'd say, like, this is, by the way, David Feisenberg Jr., and he's the man who's visited more countries in the
Countries,
world.
number of places. Like
Places,
somebody
even.
could say, yeah, somebody could say, I went to Russia. But if you've been to Moscow, that doesn't mean you've been to Russia. I mean, exactly, you've been to Moscow. Like somebody could say, I went to America. Where? New York, LA, one or two places. Like, you cannot say that you've actually understood Russia without going to many places. You've got to go to minimum 100 places in Russia because it's that big. It is that big. You cannot just say that, hey, I've been to a number of countries. Like some people say, I've been to, X number of countries. It
And
doesn't,
you've been to some of the rarest, new world cities that are being built. You were talking about you went to Kazakhstan, and just in general, all the places you've
yeah,
seen. And what's weird to the rest of the world, but what makes perfect sense to me after seeing a lot of places myself, not as many, but I've seen
yeah,
quite a few, is that certain things start to present themselves, and you race into the front with what's going on, looking at Tartaria and seeing this link between the religions and state control. One of the big ones for me that was interesting was I just did a video on Maimonides, and so then we were talking about Muhammad and this idea that, well, that Siddhartha's story and Christ's story are, at some point they divided up the life out of the Bible so that people would try to believe that the death of this character would give them what they needed. And then the other characters, they said, well, you need to focus on life and suffering, and there's little reward to it. And then meanwhile, there's law, and law is taking over this idea of religion instead of it being more about finding pujas or whatever it was before. So I've
yeah,
always looked at it as being kind of Vedic, but it's impossible to ignore the Arabic link to everything. When you see the word, hola in Spanish, there's 13,000 words in Spanish that are Arabic, like aloha is backwards from hola, essentially. And you start looking at la and el, and
yeah.
all.
Okay, now that you've mentioned that word, okay, I'll make it a bit simple. The average person um, has a very small, limited understanding of mathematics. Now, a major reason why somebody like Fomenko could understand history was because of mathematics. Now, if you read Wikipedia, they try to confuse you what this is all about, and then they try to show that, hey, Fomenko, he tries to show astrology, blah blah blah, and then they try and confuse you. Now, if you've read my books, then you will notice that mathematics is used a lot in creating the fake history. There's a maths code in the Bible. Some people think, wow, it's so amazing. But what people don't understand is all the modern languages, for instance, Spanish, like, for example, if you talk to anybody who was around in Spain in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, Spanish was not widely spoken there, maybe even by less than 10% of the population. Now, what people are not going to ask the question is, if less than 10% spoke Spanish there in Spain, and General Franco had to force it into the people through the education system as the urbanization process happened, that people started going into the cities, Why are they all speaking Spanish in Latin America? In most of the countries there. Um, there seems to be no link. It's almost like somebody imposed that language on them in the last 150 years. Yeah, in Italy too, the average person couldn't speak modern Italian until the 1930s and 40s. You can ask people to ask their grandparents. In Turkey too, most people couldn't speak Turkish. Yeah. So if in France, most people couldn't even speak French until after the 1930s, when the process of urbanization increased. People were still living in holes, caves, and mountains. Just in 1900, thousands of them in France. Nobody even knows how many, that they were coming out of the caves and from underground. As people went to the surface and as the area more buildings got built, an urbanization process. Nobody has a look at these things. Yeah. But now that you've mentioned L, all the languages, modern languages, have got a maths code. They were all created from either a single language or on a laptop. But because all the languages can translate perfectly, as long as you've got the best software program, which has not been fully developed yet, we've got Google Translate, Bing Translate. They've not managed to fit in the codes yet properly, but they're going to improve it so that translation will be perfect, because they've all got the same base
Well, a
mathematical
lot of that
code.
stuff they're not trying to let people see, but like there are, yeah, as you say,
You can
base
study it
mathematical
yourself.
code, and you can put
It's like, for example,
the code
if
together
you're
to find it.
Jewish, yeah, the average Jewish person studies gematria from a young age. We're talking 12, 13, 14, 15. I started mastering gematria in languages by the time I was 15. And then because I grew up in England, I noticed Hebrew gematria. I was brought up into it. By the age of 15, I'd mastered it. So then I noticed, hey, it was in English. I was studying French, and I could speak French very well. I started studying at the age of 10. I went to an Oxbridge grammar school. They're the best of the best schools that you could say in England. You have to pay to go there. So because I could speak very well French, I had to look at French gematria. Next thing, by the time I hit 15, 16, by the time I was 15, there's the story of the crucifixion. I'm having to do examinations in school about Jesus Christ. And you know what Jewish mentality is on Jesus Christ. So then the New Testament's in Greek. And then I realized, hey, there's gematria in Greek. But then the languages translate perfectly with the gematria codes with Hebrew. And then when I was 16, I'm in, you go past high school in England and you go to something called college. And that's when I met the first Arab person in my life. An Arabic person too. One of them was a Palestinian. Yeah, and then it made me turn and think, oh, well, and one of them was an Iraqi. And at that time, the bombing started, George Bush Senior, Iraq. So I noticed Arabs a lot then, because people were putting up posters. But the main thing is, they were, talking about their religion. Now, for example, what they said was, one thing is that, Babylon, Iraq, and I'm only 16, 17 years old, and they're turning around to me and saying, hey, all this Western history is a fake. Yeah, they're saying it from there. And then if you go to Egypt, the average Egyptian does not give a two about a single one of these monuments of ancient Egypt, because their Quran clearly says something. It says, hey, all the monuments and all the buildings, every single thing that Pharaoh and his people had built, every single thing had been totally disintegrated and destroyed by God after Moses left wherever Egypt was. Yeah, wherever it was. The current Egypt, what we call the state of Egypt, is just that, but the borders may have been bigger to include the total Sahara Desert. So then it made me question,
Wait,
thinking,
well,
oh
then
damn,
what are supposed to be then the fake
I,
things?
wait,
What are they supposed to be?
right, so every single temple, Abu Simbel, everything, the Valley of the Kings, every single thing, you can find photographs of their construction. 1900s, 1910, 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. You can see them all being constructed. And then everybody will tell you when you go to Egypt, they'll say, our fathers, our forefathers, our grandfathers, they were working with companies from the British, French, and European Empire colonialist companies that came and built these things. And then when I last went to Giza last year, there's local families there, and they're when you go as a tourist, normally you will take a bus or a coach from your hotel and you have it organized. But I I went on my own, and because I'm traveling a lot more, I normally mingle with a lot more people. So I asked questions. I actually bumped into a family who said, "Oh, the Sphinx? Oh, no, 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 no." My grandfather was here. They've been making it. Then it made me think, oh my God, they were making it? Yeah. And he said, no, he said there weren't many people living in the area near Giza. They came along as the construction workers came. They came as construction workers and they settled down in that area. So that just tells you, and then you can have a look at the old photographs, and you'll notice there's most of these so-called ancient Egyptian buildings aren't there. Even in Babylon, most of these so-called ancient Babylonian temples, blah blah blah, nothing was there. And anyway, so they've changed the languages. Now, a few words that they couldn't change, yeah, is like, for example, you mentioned the word el, al, etc. Now, what they tried to do is confuse everybody. When Ataturk practically created the Turkish language that nobody could speak in the 1930s, before then, the old world, the New World Order in English is called the New World Order. It's our new world. Yeah, the old world order was called Altın Orda. Now, if you go to Siberia, Central Russia, we're talking ethnic Russians here. They're going to turn around to you, yeah, it was called the Altın Orda. Now, the thing is, I said, hey, that sounds like a Turkish word because the word altın means gold in Turkish. Yeah, I found that out because I met somebody in Turkey many, many years ago who said their surname is gold. And I said, where did you get that surname from? And they said Ataturk created the word and gave them a list of words to choose their family name from. So, and then, but when I got to Siberia, they turned around and said, oh, no, 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 no. The meaning of Altın Orda. Orda means order. Yeah. Altın means al, means from God, or Allah in Arabic, or Allah in Hebrew. Al means God, and tin means garden of Eden. Yeah? So Altın Orda means the old world order was the order of God in the garden that he left us when we came here. Yeah? And that's why they talk about King Arthur. The word king is what do you call it? You could say it means Khan in Mongolian, but it's not a Mongolian word because even in Bulgaria people have the name Khan. Many Slavic people, but that name has died out over there after the nationalists took over in the 20s. Yeah, in many graves you can actually see people who were called Khan, King, or
So it's
whatever
a
you want to
Tartar
call it.
name. It's a normal Tartar name that the
Well,
Mongolians
yeah,
still
I don't want to
use.
use the word Tatar. It's because the thing is, the word Tatar means fatherland. Yeah, it just means fatherland simply. Yeah, even in Albanian, yeah, they call it Ata. Yeah, like the fatherland. Yeah, Albanian. Don't forget Ankara city in Turkey. Half the city of Ankara and the suburbs and the surrounding areas, they spoke a language called Albanian. But their Albanian is different from modern Albanian, which has been modified under King Ahmet Zogu in Albania, the so-called dictator. Like there was General Franco in
Yep.
Spain, there was Mussolini in Italy.
And
These
there's
people were all part of the same system.
the
That
Albanian
these
genocide took out the entire. Well, how many people still speak? Not many, I guess. The original Albanian still spoken though. So where is
Yeah,
this?
the original Albanian was actually similar to the language of the original Quran. Now, the thing is, the Quran is a controversial book, people would say. It's because it talks about, hey, get married 4 times. It doesn't. The translations have been manipulated. I had a look at it for word, but you have to be careful even for word meanings
Well, it's really
because,
weird when you look at the fact that the oldest Quran we have, is the Utman Quran. Like you were showing it's a Russian book. I mean, as
yeah,
far as I can
there's
tell.
there was one from Russia, the St. Petersburg one. I wrote about it in the book, and there was the other one supposedly from Istanbul, Turkey. But Istanbul Topkapi Museum, I had a look at the record of that when the British, French, and the Americans occupied it. Seemed like they occupied Baghdad. Yeah. After World War One, the British, French, and the Americans occupied the Utman Topkapi Museum, and they mysteriously, and the Turks for hundreds of years, they never found it, but the British, French, and the American administration mysteriously found the Piri Reis world map, which showed the world's topography 500 years ago to show that it was equal to today. and it just didn't make sense. And there was evidence to show that that map had been falsified. So when that showed up, it's very understandable why the Uthman Topkapi Museum Quran A isn't complete, and B, most people are not allowed to see it, and C, a transcript has been released, but it's not sure what this transcript is, etc. Now, in the future, if they do say, hey, we've got a complete Quran here in Topkapi Museum, nobody knows. But the oldest verified Quran we've got is the one in Uzbekistan in Tashkent. Now, the thing is, that's not from Tashkent at all. Lenin sent it there mysteriously in the 1920s to Tashkent. I've got no idea why he's going to send it there. But the thing is, before that, it was in St. Petersburg. Now, I don't even understand what it was doing in St. Petersburg. But the alleged story is it was taken from Tashkent in the 1860s and 70s. But if you have a look at the photographs of Tashkent in the 1860s and 70s, the place looks like it was totally devastated and bombed from the air. The pictures are in my book. That it's impossible even for the so-called Russian army to have gone there with their horses and carriages. Even a horse cannot move through that mud. There's that much mud that you could see. It's worse than any photograph. You know, I don't know how to describe it. You could, the pictures are in my books, but also you can find them online. Tashkent, Uzbekistan. And
I'm going to put a link, by the way, to your books because they're, I think Voltaire said that the $1 million, libraries, they don't really cause revolutions. It's the pamphlet that really turns pages. Your books are really good and short, and they give a lot of
Voltaire,
information.
by the way, is another imaginary character they made up.
I like the imaginary characters Voltaire, Democles, and Astonis. I feel like the more we look at Democles, it's like, whoa, look at all these fake people.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry for the long answer, but let me tell you now. So it all comes down to when they changed the languages, they couldn't change one word that was so big amongst the European people. The word Allah. Yeah, Allah is how they say it in Yugoslavia, so I've just said it like that. The Arabs will say Allah. Yeah, but anyway, I'll tell you what they did in England. In England, they know that people will obey Allah, so they just changed it to obey the law. Yes, in France, they know that everybody will. Yes. Now you're beginning to see.
Ouch, that was a good one.
No, I'm being serious to you. It's because when you look at Gematria, there's certain words that don't fit in Gematria, and then you'll notice it's because they failed to change some of the words. Like in French, vous acceptez la loi, L-O-I, law, Allah, yeah, accept the law. So you're beginning to see what happened. And then, the orphan trains, they claimed there was only 250,000 children taken. Now, the thing is, when they went around the world, whoever this big group of people is, they were so organized that when the last civilization, call it Tataria, collapsed, they had to be very fast to set up the new civilization. So they already had the new history prepared, everything prepared, and they looked for people who will be the nationalists to set up these nationalist borders everywhere so that they could take control. It was a long-term plan. Yeah, so they already knew what they were doing. So when they were replacing the languages, one of the strongest places that they couldn't handle was Europe. So they took away many people's children, and they changed families between many children in Western Europe especially. Let's say they took them from New York and they probably shipped them off to Australia. They took them from Paris or northern France in the villages and they sent them to the Midwest. Now, many of these children, they had no parents, no nothing. They're working in the factories. You can have a look, in many photographs, 1880s, 1890s, 1910.
It also shows like how the parents were murdered. It's interesting looking at witch trials and things where they burn people.
Can you imagine what happened to those children?
They started
drinking from a young age, open sex culture, everything.
And they were taught a completely new language. They had to start over completely.
New history.
They were programmed.
But the thing is, what you will notice is that in the early photographs of these so-called children, some of the females aged 12 have got their hair covered with a headgear. Then when they were taken away, there's no headgear. This is what I found strange. It's because I noticed it's very difficult, especially for people who've been indoctrinated with the religion, to take their headscarf off. Especially from the Middle East, it's very difficult. Yeah, unless if they've been brainwashed, in the new system wherever they live. Like if you go to Germany, many younger Turks don't seem to believe what their grandparents were taught.
But
Yeah,
even
and
even
they
if you
think,
go to like a flour, I went to a flour mill, and the women
yeah,
all, when they first got there, they didn't have headscarves, and they would get covered in dust, and so they all started wearing headscarves immediately. They would make them themselves, and then they became standard to the uniform because all the girls came wearing headscarves, so they started supplying them. So it seems like it's a natural thing that these girls would have
not just a
continued. Yeah.
natural. Wait, it's not just a natural thing. There's more to it than that. If you have a look at, hey, one, what is the Christmas tree doing in Europe? The Christmas tree? The evidence of a Christmas tree that many researchers have tried to see how far it goes back. It doesn't go far back than 4 or 5 centuries. That made people question, did Jesus Christ live 2,000 years ago? Questions such as that. Now, if you ask many historians, what is the Christmas tree? They'll say it's probably from a pagan tradition, blah, 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 etc. There is no document in the world that could explain the Christmas tree, apart from the Muslim Quran. I'm being serious to you. Even I still cannot understand it. This made me rethink what the religion.
Where's the Quran go into the like the Yule Maypole? Like what is it about the Christmas
Okay,
tree from the Quran?
wait, about the Christmas tree. I'll tell you, I couldn't believe it. It says that Jesus Christ, when he was born beside a tree. Yeah? And when he was born beside the tree, there were sugar fruits on the tree, date palms. So let's say if you lived in Germany, they don't have date palm trees. So people would find a tree, and then they would decorate it and put some fruits on it. That's what they would do at Christmas time, or the time just to remember the birth of Jesus Christ, because the birth of Jesus Christ, according to this religious system of monotheism, the Abrahamic faiths, was that it was a miracle. Christ was born from a virgin, born beside a tree, and there were sweets and gifts on the tree that fell down and that his mother ate, while she was giving birth to him, and after that, yeah, while she was feeding him. So that story actually is in the Quran. It's nowhere else. Yes. So the thing is, it makes you think. Hey, if you have a look at the whole of Europe, what it was in 1860, yeah, there's Russian researchers, somebody called Ulrich something. Yes, I had a look at some of his things, and he shows that the history of Northern Europe, they shifted it to the south, and then they went to the south and gave some of their history to the people in the north. Yeah. So it looks like Islam probably played, or original Islam, not modern day Islam, which has been infected, and with the same books that they put into Judaism and Christianity, they've given extra books in Islam. It looks like that Northern Europe may have actually probably been followers of the Quran. This is what it looks like. Now, the Quran, it does not say, that you should have 4 wives at the same time, blah, blah, blah. I actually went through that verse myself. Yeah, and I cannot give an accurate full translation because the old Arabic has been played around with. But from what it says get married once, get married twice if you wish, get married for the 3rd time or the 4th time. It doesn't say marry all 4 of them at the same time, but it says it's best if you got married only once. Now, now modern Muslims, how they interpret that, that's their business. But whatever the original meaning was, it's clear. It says get married only once. So now people will use these things to show that this book is against human rights. It's not. The translations have been manipulated. Now, when people were going to school in the 1940s and 50s and 60s in England, if they did anything wrong, it was a tradition that, or if you stole something, the teacher will get the ruler out and he's going to give you, and he'll hit your hand with the ruler. Now, in the Quran, it says, if there is a thief, you shall strike his hand. Now, today, on purpose, it's translated as, you shall strike his hand off. That could mean cut his hand off. But from what we can see, what they did in Northern Europe, the tradition was that if there was a thief, you punished him on his hand. I don't mean cutting them off. I mean caned. You know, like a punishment. So I'm
Yeah,
saying,
there was another thing
yeah,
I wanted to get to before we got too far away from the language thing, which I find interesting, was when I
yeah.
first started looking into Tartaria, Etruscans and the the Thracians use a script which is like a mirror reversed Latin script, and it looks, if you start to look at it, you can start to see patterns just in the terms of right to left, left to right. And when these parents were burned at the stake for being quote unquote pagans, just like the Orthodox were told they had to cross themselves the other direction, these people were told they had to pray backwards. A lot of the time they said these people were satanically taking the Lord's Prayer and doing it backwards, doing it note for note and sound for sound backwards, which I think is interesting when you look at words like El and, El is Elohim and Allah, because you have forwards and backwards El and
Oh,
La.
you just said Elohim. Now,
Right.
if you speak to anybody, yeah, who's an Arab, he's going to pronounce that word Allahumma, Elohim. Yeah, Allahumma. Yes. So it's a question of pronunciation. Like, in Manchester, if I see somebody, I'll say good morning, but this means good morning. Good morning. Don't even pronounce the D in your local area. So actually, Hebrew and Arabic is actually the same language, but they deliberately separated it. Same like Serbian, Macedonian, and Bulgarian was deliberately separated by nationalists. And even today, in the next 20 years, you will soon see Bosnians, Croats, and Serbs probably will not understand each other maybe after 20 years' time, because their local nationalists are making sure that the languages are further drifted apart.
Do you think that there
That's,
is something to the idea of turning the languages backwards, like that we're speaking
yeah,
something
it's
in
very
reverse?
easy. Right. Actually, what you have to do is have a look at how a language is created. You can imagine if you put it down A, B, C, D, E, F, G to Z. You could change the letters and put it backwards, Z to whatever. That's how half the world's languages have been made. They've already been turning them backwards, sideways, upside down, left and right. That's why some languages speak, the sentence construction is backwards in some languages compared to another. It's like I learned Turkish and Japanese. I thought, oh my God, what the hell? The languages are backwards compared to, English. Yeah, and it really did my head in. Yeah, it really did my head in. You'd say "Ohayo gozaimasu" in Japanese, and in English, in England, you'll say "Hi, good morning." Yeah, it's like it's "Hi, morning, good." In
Like
Japanese, it's
that's
"Hi, morning, good."
that's
So
so. Say it again in Japanese. Ohio.
"Ohayo gozaimasu."
It's very
Yeah,
close. It's
but it
very
does your
close.
head in when you learn the language. It does your head in because you have to think from backwards to forwards. So it really does your head in. But once you get used to it, you will see the global picture. It's not just one language. Half the languages are already backwards.
I saw
Half of them.
I saw a good one the
Because,
other week, which was Osama is king, in Japanese, and it's lion
Osama.
and
Okay.
lion
Okay.
in
You've noticed
Arabic.
about the Mayan thing.
In Arabic,
Mayans.
yeah. In the
Okay.
Mayans, yeah. Go
Oh,
for it.
okay. Okay. I'll tell you. This is very obvious. Now, the most of the so-called Mayans today, more and more of them are going to live in city areas as they're leaving the villages. Yeah, that's why you can see a lot of Mayans and other peoples, ethnic peoples are trying to get to the U.S. border through, through Mexico, because many of them are just villagers anyway. Many of them, some of them might be suffering from so-called persecution, but many of them are just running from poverty. Now, the so-called Mayans, yeah, that if somebody from Japan went to meet the Mayans, let's say in Mexico or some other place in Latin America in 1960, yeah, a lot of modern Japanese has been there for the last 50 to 100 years. Now, if somebody came from a village area in Japan and he did very well in education, let's say he was in university in the 1940s. Yeah, he was age 65, retiring in the 1960s. Now, let's say this man is retiring in the 1960s. He goes on holiday to Brazil or Mexico. He bumps into a Mayan. Now, this Japanese man in the 1960s, he's aged about 60, but he was 10 years old in 1910, and his grandparents were probably still alive. His grandparents spoke a totally different language, but he remembers half that language. Now, many Japanese tourists who went to visit the Mayans or bumped into them in the 1960s and 70s said the Mayans were speaking the exact same language that their grandparents were. Go and check that out. So now this started making me think, hey, these so-called Native Americans, there was, 500 years ago, they said there was 150 million of them, or more than that. I'm not sure. I've forgotten the number. There should be at least 500 million of these people today.
Well, it's
Yeah.
crazy looking at California and along the California coast, of Pacific coast up to Canada. The tribes there, the Haida, for instance, use totem poles just like the Japanese. The art is very similar. A lot of the names are very similar, and then we have a very open admittance
Yeah.
that the Japanese were going back and forth to California into the 40s, and so
Okay.
we then started taking Japanese from California, putting them in internment camps. So they took a lot of
Okay.
Californian Japanese and removed them,
Yeah.
and then they gave
There's
their land
there's
to
more
other
to
people to hide
yeah.
out with had been a Japanese West
Yeah.
Coast, all the way to
Well, there's
Chile.
more. Yeah, there's more to it than that. It's because what many people don't want to consider is if the history is a joke, what about the geography? This is a serious question. Do you really believe that the world maps, the world coastlines, everything is correct? Oh, the satellites? If there's thousands of satellites up there, then they can't make a mistake in taking photographs of the coastline. Off the coast of Western Australia is supposed to be Sandy Island. Yeah, it shows up on all these so-called satellite
Every once in
photographs.
a while, yeah. Some
Well,
people
no,
find it.
wait, but Sandy Island isn't small, it's pretty big. And it's on every single satellite photograph. Yeah? Now, the strange thing is, people thought, hey, let's go and check this island, from an educational institution in Western Australia. They went there and they discovered the island wasn't even there. That's when they started questioning geography. Then there is the other questions. Most people have never, been to Alaska, northern Alaska. Who said that the straits are there separating Russia from Alaska? What if they're joined together as one piece of land, and that you can actually cross the land from Russia into North America? What if it's not separate? People don't know. The true geography of the world, people haven't checked. It's because if people check, then it brings into question, is the earth flat or is it not? Are we living under a dome?
That's pretty funny because when I was
Yeah,
in Ushuaia down in South America at the tip, I could totally see, I believed at the time, Antarctica. And they're like, oh no, it's not possible according to the maps. But then they've started saying, well, it's growing and this and that, so they can kind of explain what's going on to people who happen to see it. But for the most part, they just try to keep people out of there. I mean, they've
yeah,
closed all the parks, they've closed all the land, they've kept people
yeah.
inside.
Well, anyway, there could be two reasons why there's all these lies there. Now, the old world order is there. Now, from what I could see in Fomenko's research, he doesn't want to say it clearly, but he's practically stating at the bottom of his research that the only history that there is actually based on the Quran, because it's the only document that is challenging history. Now, I'm going to get to the bottom line of this. Now, the thing is, I had a look at why Fomenko could be like that, because his team of researchers and other people who are involved, there's over 1,000 state people from the Russian state who are getting paid by the Russian state. I had a look at when after the US war in Afghanistan. Now the US and the Saudis and other people, they created their own versions of Islam so that to make people crazy enough to fight the Soviets, or otherwise the Soviets would have probably dominated, Southwestern Asia. It was actually scary. So after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the US didn't just sit there. Putin says this openly. He actually says this after Crimea joined Russia, or in European terms, after Russia annexed Crimea. It depends on your point of view, if you're American or if you're Russian. So after that, he made a speech saying that the West, yeah, the Western leaders wanted to dismantle Russia and break it apart like the former Yugoslavia. So what they did was they were sending in their bogus Islamists into Russia, into Tataristan and into the Muslim populations of Russia. Now, officially, there's 20% practicing Muslims in Russia. But if you look at unofficial figures of looking at what so-called traditional Islam is according to the Russian state, or according to how Putin describes traditional Islam, means away from all these schisms, yeah, it's up to half the country. Up to half the country. And the threat was that, many young, uneducated people could join, this modern version of Islam. Well, anyway, the war started from Chechnya, started spreading north and spreading into Dagestan. It was that dangerous that we're talking that the Chechen army went to Moscow, and they practically had a bit of a battle with Yeltsin inside the Kremlin. They actually forced him to get up from the Kremlin's seat, and their leader sat down on the Kremlin seat. Many people don't know about this. It could have led to the collapse of Russia. Now, some people will say we don't like Russia. It's not about if you like it or not. You need order. There's millions of people living there, and millions of people would be affected by it worldwide. There would be chaos. Yeah. Well, anyway, when Putin came to power, he realized these new versions of Islam, new versions of Buddhism, and new versions of Christianity. He banned them all. Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, etc. Everything. He said, no, they're going. And then he said, let's bring out the truth in history. And actually, the Russian state has been pushing it to get the truth in history out. I think Russia wants to show that they are more to do with, hey, we are right, we're on the right side. And that's why all these things are coming out. But now we've got a new problem. Once we find true history, we've got another new problem. The biggest problem will be at the end of the day is, okay, then let's say, hey, the old world order, Altenorda, or call it Tataria, or call it Slavonic Russia, whatever you want to call it, yeah? Call it, Atlantis. It's up to you what you want to call it. Yes, we've got a problem. Now, the old world order was based on the order of heaven. Yes, Altenorda, the order of heaven. Al, God, Eden, and the order. So it was based on the order of heaven. And now the question is, we've got to ask, where did this Quran come from? Yes, where did Moses, Muhammad, Jesus, whoever they were resisting who and what? There's two sides there. Now, they claimed and they alleged that this is the order of heaven and of God. Now, the New World Order is a secular world order. It means a world without the so-called order of God. Yes, where man will be free to choose his own wishes, to choose if he wants to be gay, he will. You understand? It's your choice. Now, in the old world order, yeah, some people are saying it's so amazing and so beautiful. You couldn't have that choice because it was based on the so-called, what they claimed to be was the natural order of God. What they claimed. Now, many people are making it out that Tatari was so amazing and so beautiful. But a war happened, yeah, and something happened that destroyed it. Yeah, that it's been destroyed. There might have been external forces that we don't understand that could have been involved. Some people would call it God. Other people would call it aliens. Some would call it angels. Yeah. Others would call it, yeah, an alien force. But what we know is that civilization collapsed and there's been huge catastrophe. Yeah. But after we've got there, now, no wonder they would lie about history, because who would want to know? Yes, who would want to teach their children about such devastation? People would be so terrified and so worried. Anybody who's already studying this subject, I've noticed many people, I have to calm them down. That some people are saying, I want to change my life, I want to do this, blah, blah, blah. And I said, everything's okay. Yeah, I have to tell them, hey, don't worry. There's nothing to worry about. It's because, you've got to think, if you are going to set up an world order tomorrow, the average person in the world can't read or write. More than half of them like a proper newspaper. Now, you've got to think what these people are going to believe in. What are we going to do? Are we going to start forcing people? Now, the old world order eventually became a dictatorship. And that's when the freedom fighters said, hey, you're going a bit too much out of control. You know, these people like Moses is and the Mohammeds and the Jesus is, there was many of these people and they called them messengers. Now, the difference is in Christianity, they say Christ is the best. In modern Islam, they say Muhammad is the best. In Buddhism, they say Buddha was the chosen one. But if you read the Quran actually says, hey, no, these people, they were the people who were standing up for God's world order. Yes, and that every single one of them is equal because they were freedom fighters. Read the Quran, it says, there is no difference between the respect that you give any of these people. Oh yeah, modern Judaism now, you know, puts Moses at a heightened status. But the Quran actually says a different story. I actually read that myself, not just having a look at the quote by researchers. I was surprised. I thought I'll have a look at it. I opened up the Quran and had a look at it, and I saw it says, oh no, they're all equal, that you shouldn't discriminate between them. Yeah, well anyway, so the thing is, after we found all this out, now I've got to the stage that I found out a lot, but what I cannot prove, yeah, is which order is correct, the New World Order or the Order of Heaven. I don't know which one is right. Yeah, the Order of Heaven, they claim that God has chosen them and selected them. And this is how God wants the order of the world to be. The New World Order has said that God's world order has failed. Yes? And that freedom and that individual man should decide what his own destiny should be. Now, it does matter that they lied in the New World Order. Yes, it does. But what are we going to do? There's all these people out there, millions of them. Half the world is, you know, backwards economically. We haven't even got the world ready economically yet. People want cars, they want houses, they want new furniture, they want the best televisions. People have got so many wants. So I don't know the final answer. But anyway, I've told you from what I saw in Fomenko's research, because I started reading his books when he started publishing them, like from book 1, book 2, book 3, book 4. And as he went along, I noticed that what he did in his final books was that he practically wrote a book based on the Quran. Yeah, it was practically about Islam, about who Muhammad may have been according to him, etc., and how the old world order, you know, the order of heaven, how it worked. So that's what he did.
So what do you see when you look at that? Like, what do you when you see? Okay, so is Christ Buddha and Muhammad? Are they some weird fellowship of the rings? Were they adversaries? Are they at the
Right.
same time, or are they in an order? Like,
Right. This is the thing that what Fomenko points out is the history timelines. He's done it, but now many other people have checked it. I checked it myself. I didn't take his word for it. I went and checked every single king in most European countries and most Middle East nations and in China. I checked more than half of the world's so-called history kings, and I noticed the dates are the same. And I put them on graphs myself. I checked them. I'm not somebody who just thinks, hey, somebody says something, I'm taking my word for it. Okay, they created the fake history. Now, you're asking me about these people. Oh, I forgot the question. What do I think about what? About the Mohammeds and the Buddhas?
well, yeah. I mean, do you think that they're the same person? Who are they? Who is Buddha? Who is
Right.
Jesus? Who is
Okay,
Muhammad?
now I'll give you an example now. Like today, a so-called modern day person who resisted the United States is that man with the glasses, and he revealed something about the US states and ran off to Russia. What's his name? Edward Snowden. Now he claims to be a modern day resistance fighter, saying the state is doing these things. I don't like it. Yeah, you know, and he was out there doing the revelations. Yes. So these people in the old world order, it's like you've noticed is not just a one-day thing. Like we've got Donald Trump in our world order today. It was Obama yesterday. Before him, it was George Bush. So when Tataria was there were different leaders. They came and went. Yeah, and eventually the place became a dictatorship. And then there were people who were doing the resistance. Yes, and then they did their resistance. Yeah, and then practically Tataria fell. Now the resistance, after that, the New World Order sprang up from the resistance. Now the New World Order could actually be the bad people from Tataria who turned it into a dictatorship, or it could be the resistance. And that the resistance thought, hey, we don't want any of this history to be there for the New World Order. Let's just make the New World beautiful. Give everybody a great history. Macedonia has got its own Alexander the Great. The Greeks say, no, 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 he was ours. The Russians say, no, he was ours in the form of Alexander Nevsky. Yes. The Arabs say he was ours, Al-Iskandar. So you've given everybody a great history. You've given them all their Stonehenges, the pyramids, the Great Walls of China. You give them all these fake things, and you know what? You keep the world happy. That's what you do so that everybody can get along. Now, the question is that right or is that wrong? Some people will say, we've been lied to. Yes. Okay, now, but the question is, why did they lie? Now, we've got a problem because these two sides are fighting. And in the end, you've got to choose which one is correct. I don't know. One side claims that the order of heaven, Altan Orda, yes, is the one that God or the Creator has chosen. Call him God, call him plasma, universe, or the force of life. You can call him whatever you want.
Great is the
But
law.
Huh?
Great is the law. Allah,
Yeah. So I'm saying there's two sides. We know that there's these two sides. They've been fighting for centuries. They're still fighting today. Yeah. It's like if you think that they're still not fighting today, yeah, when you look at what happened at the Twin Towers, it happened on September the 11th. What people don't realize is that when the Japanese were fighting the Americans, they had four big warships. And in their language, like I said to you, one of them was called Jesus, one was called Moses, and one was called, Muhammad. Yeah? And one was just called Ya Medi, or Mita, the sweet one, in Sanskrit. Now, the problem is that the Americans, when they walked into Japan, it was suspicious how they walked into Japan because Japan never got defeated, and evidence shows there was no atomic bombs. For example, the US, the British, and the French had to fight only 2 German divisions in West Germany in 1945. The Russians were fighting over 200 German divisions, and they got to Berlin. 200 German divisions, and the US and the British had to fight 2 divisions. So it's almost like Hitler left Europe open for the West to come in. Yeah, and then the two divisions in the West didn't even put up a fight or resistance. Now, when Stalin had just entered Berlin, his army crossed into Sakhalin Island, and they were going to launch the mainland invasion of Japan. Immediately when that happened, the United States and Japan became best friends. Yeah, but on September the 11th in 1945, the United States issued a warrant, yeah, to arrest the leaders of Japan, the military leaders. Now, the thing is, in Japan, they have that shrine called Yasukun. Like you said, Sama is the name for God. It's actually a respectful word in Japanese. But anyway, they've got a shrine there called Yasukun. Yeah. Now you will notice that the Arabs, they called Jesus Isa. The Jewish people call him Isa. The Japanese call him Yisa or Yasa. So Yasukun, kun means like king, Khan. Yes. So as you go further east, they say kun, Khan, and then king. Oh yeah. So I'm trying to tell you about the timeline. So the thing is, when the Japanese, yeah, you've asked me about Jesus and Muhammad, did they live at what times? Yeah. So the thing is, the Japanese were fighting as if this Jesus Christ guy is more recent. That's why they've still got the Yasukun shrine, which is based on Jesus. Yeah. Which is based on Jesus. And then the thing is, in the Quran is the only document that totally challenges Western history. Now, this is the funniest thing. It turns around and says there was Moses, and that Moses had Aaron to support him. The same story as they say in Christianity and in Judaism. But then it turns around and says Moses, he wasn't the brother of Moses and Aaron were not brothers, but they were like brothers in the religious sense, or something similar to that. But Aaron had a sister, a biological sister, the Quran says. This is why the story of the Quran is totally different. But you know what they do in our side of the world? They make you think, oh no, the Muslims have got the same as Christianity, but they've just got Muhammad extra. And now the Muslims are told this too, so they don't even bother to check. They think, well, we got the same as Christianity, so it must be the same timeline. But no, the Quran turns around and says something strange. And Fomenko and other researchers point out some facts related to this. And the thing is, I read this many years ago when first met Muslims, and I went to a mosque when I was first, I think I was 18 years old. So at that time, when I was 18 years old, I discovered that, and I thought, no way, this cannot be possible. But at that time, but um, it says in the Quran that Aaron had a sister called Mary. Now Mary had a son called Jesus. That's what it says. In other words, Moses was alive at the time of Jesus Christ, but he was older. Can you see what I'm getting at? The Quran actually says that timeline. Now, the only other people who've now shown that these world timelines are a joke is, from Russia. And in Russia, they're openly teaching this in the schools now. You could say, the people who bother to learn the history, half of Russia knows all this stuff now. Maybe in Europe and America, we'd turn around thinking, oh my God, I can't believe it. You go to that side of the world, they'll say, we know. Or if you went to the Muslim countries, they'll say, yeah, we're still fighting resistance against the West. That's what they'll say. Yeah, because they know what's in their religion, but their religion's been infected with new books too. So that's why you've got to be careful. But in Russia, they're keeping these new books away.
So
Yeah?
what is your approximation then? Like, can you do a from Abram to Jesus or Muhammad timeline, kind of like in your mind, like how it fits?
Right. This is the thing I've noticed. Some people are trying to make sure that the agenda is focused just on Tartaria now. I'll tell you how. Imagine if you're somebody. Yeah. Imagine if you're the person who created the fake history. Then you created ancient Greece, ancient Persia, ancient Babylon, etc. And you've made sure that the world has been distracted by all that. Now, there's people out there, like I said, these videos are there to manipulate people and keep them occupied, just focusing on mud flood, advanced technology, on a few buildings, and they're still doing the same videos again and again. It's been, 5 years. They're not making no progress, and they're focusing on just one civilization called, the fatherland Tartaria, which they say in English. Yeah, they're focusing on.
Like Tartaria is not even the right what they would have called themselves, right? Like it sounds like maybe the sons of Canaan were referred to as the fatherland by others, like, but that's why we're calling them that, not that
Right,
they even use that word, right?
right. As you've noticed that what do you call it? You just said the sons of Canaan, Cain. Yes, but you will notice that hey, what do you call it? If you actually look on a map of so-called modern Israel today, it's not called Canaan, it's just called Cam. So,
Is is that maybe why American,
yeah,
American and yeah, American.
yeah, yeah. Well, anyway, the thing is, what I was going to say is, you've asked me about can I make a timeline, from Abraham, etc. Yes, you can. There is a true world history. But Fomenko has done his part, and he didn't do it all by himself. They had to have so many people involved, so many investigators. Like many of the teams had to go and visit all these sites, and they had to bring out the proof of old photographs. Well, that's why they call it Russian misinformation now in the West. That's what it's called. Yeah. But they did their part. But of course, they can't do everything. Yeah. They can't do everything. That's why the New World Order has got a point that they say, look at the world. The world is lazy. The world will never understand, yes, how the old world or the order of heaven worked. It needs a lot of education, blah, 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 which is true. The average
Well, I
person
mean, but the
cannot be
other
bothered learning.
the other thing to remember is of all the symbols that they've allowed us in South Park and the world, the one that they've taken away is Muhammad, right? Like you can do God as a platypus,
Right.
you can do
Okay.
Jesus throwing Santa Claus, but you can't show Muhammad. Why are they hiding that information? That's kind of weird.
It's because if you notice the Bible, for example, it was supposed to be world history, starting from Adam down to the latest part. Now, the mysterious thing is, the Bible talks about the War of Armageddon, but now in the King James Version, it's written in the future tense. In other words, it's not happened, it's going to happen. But if you really look at the Bible, it's practically showing that Armageddon has happened. That was what is called, the end of Tartaria. It collapsed, the four kings of the world, etc., blah, blah, blah. And then the man on the white horse, yeah, the Muslims claim that Muhammad was the man on the white horse. The French claim Napoleon was the man on the white horse. The Americans claim it was George Washington on the white horse. Yeah, or the
Yep.
man on the
But
white
who was
horse.
on the green horse, man, with the four horsemen?
That was supposed to be Jesus Christ with his four apostles. Some people say. Other people
Ah,
say that it was supposed to represent the four seasons. That is not clear. It's because that I've spoken. Some people asked me before, but because I don't have conclusive evidence of that, I'm not going to talk about that. But
that's fair.
what it looks like is that no wonder the Bible stopped being written 200 years ago, because that was the end of history. Armageddon happened, or the end of Tartaria. That was it. That's why. So the Bible isn't an old book. That's why Fomenko even said, "Hey, it's not an old book." And then he even says, "Yeah, many of Fomenko and other researchers with him say, what if the New Testament was written before the Old Testament?" Yes. Now this is when the Quran is the only document that has mentioned this for the last few centuries, apart from Fomenko. Now, when Fomenko first said that, I saw this video. It was on YouTube. I remember when it first came out. I started laughing the way, because they used this electronic voicing. And what if, the Old Testament was written after the New Testament? The way it's just so funny. Some of these Fomenko videos, whoever made them on, 10, 15 years ago on YouTube. But the Quran actually says that, Moses was talking to many people at the time, and he was giving a speech, like, let's say Donald Trump does to large crowds at election time. But anyway, Moses was giving a speech, yes? And Moses told the people who were there that they should look at the two books that were available to him during his lifetime. The two books that two people have given to the average public. And he said one of the books is the book that he's left behind, called the Torah. And he said another book is the Gospel. In other words, that book was here on earth during Moses' lifetime. Now this is what the Quran states. Now that's why Fomenko and others, they put down their research, they presented their proofs to show that, hey, the New Testament and the Old Testament, they were written around the same time, and probably the Gospels were probably finished even before the Torah, the original books. But the thing is, the Quran mentions these things. Now the thing that got to me is that I can see that the Quran is probably the Old World Order book. Yeah, it's because it's got the Old World Order facts correct. Like it says everything in ancient Egypt got destroyed. So why do we have all these temples there? But then if you check them all, you can find, hey, they were all recently constructed in the last 100 years. You can find the construction photos. So it's very suspicious. The Quran talks about saying, hey, go and have a look in your city, the city that you're living in. Look at these buildings carefully. Look at the city carefully. And you will soon realize that there was another civilization living in the city that you're walking in. It says this. And it says this is the historical proof that you will need to show that this message is from the Creator, because nobody else will know it. Yes. Now, these are the challenges that, the average person has never even read the Quran. But, when these Russians are putting these things through, they're explaining it. But I'm saying everyone's focusing on Tartaria. Like you said, the timelines, there were other civilizations that are mentioned in the Quran. And now these civilizations are not mentioned in Western history. What we focus on is Persia, ancient Greece, etc. What the Quran talks about is strange things. It talks about the father race, the people of Atta or Tartaria, and it says they got dealt with and destroyed. And it talks about another group of people called the Tamud, yeah, and they got destroyed, yeah. And then it talks about the people of Norway. It talks about the nations that were on earth and what happened to them. Now, I've remembered his name, Ulrich Varoni. Yeah, he's a researcher, and he shows that the history of the North was moved to the South. For example, in some examples that he gives. Yeah, and if you have a look at Southern Europe, like I said, the Arabs and the Turks, the Albanians say Iskander Bey or Iskanderbeg. Yeah, Alexander. They're fighting about him in the South. But the Quran says something strange. It says that this Iskander Yeah, was it Iskander? I've forgotten the name. But anyway, it says that there was this great man, a leader of a world empire long ago, and he had two horns. In other words, like the Vikings or like Attila the Hun. Then you'll soon start realizing why Attila the Hun has been demonized. It says this man had two horns. Yes, and he was from the, he looked like a Viking. In other words, it means he's from the north. But in today's history, this man was from the south, like Alexander's from the south. But many historians from Russia will point to evidence saying no, he's from the north. And this history has been shifted down to south. They just played around with history, changed it, copied it, added on extra. There's too many cases. But we can have a timeline. The only document that we can see that can actually show any sort of timeline that so far that matches any history, that if people actually look at actual history, is the Quran. But if people are going to ask me, hey, is the order of heaven and this Quran, were they correct? That I don't know.
Yeah, I
that
mean,
I'm making clear.
yeah, this
That
is a
I
good.
don't know.
That's a good thing, and it's more anthropological, which is actually good because I think a lot of people will be able to approach this subject more from an objective, historical anthropological view. But the question
We've
still
got to look at it historically.
yeah, it's there.
The
It's
thing is,
daunting. What about the
the thing
line?
is,
You know.
yeah, the thing is, what are people going to look at the Quran in a negative way? Is they made sure that the whole world thinks, hey, Muslims have four wives. Yeah.
Well,
It's
okay, but
because,
there's a lot of
yeah,
people also that are looking that way at the Torah. You know, there's people that don't want to
yeah.
look at the
Oh,
the
but the
story of
Torah,
Moses. You know.
right? The Torah, we know for a fact because in the West we've been studying that for a long time. But the Quran, the average Western person has not studied it. Now, if you're going to go to Turkey, the average Turk has not studied, the Bible.
So
But
what
in
is
our
it?
side of the world, we were brought up in biblical history. Yeah.
But
So
is the story the same? So how does the Quran present Moses' line being drawn, and what does it mean for the people that choose which side? And is it about them? Is it about the sons
right, the
of?
story of the Quran is totally different from how it is in the Bible. The story in the Quran about Moses and Jesus and the rest of them. It's same like, let's say if you watch that movie, Total Recall, have you heard of it? There's the Arnold Schwarzenegger one and the new one, Total
Absolutely,
Recall.
it's that different.
Okay,
Wow.
okay, but you've seen them both. Now, the way the Quran describes these so-called prophets of God, they actually describe these people who were dealing with nations who had advanced technology, and they were resistance people for the resistance movement against dictatorships. That's how the Quran describes these people. Now, the way the Bible describes these so-called people, as they describe them as people who were living in with their sheep, walking around in the Middle East. Um, that's how modern Islam does as well. That these people were, practically, very poor. God came to them in a dream or something, and they were just preaching to a few people. But the Quran describes these people as resistance people. That in the Bible it shows that he had a staff and a rod. Yeah, a staff or rod or something. Now it's been deliberately been distorted to make you think, hey, that he was just some shepherd guy, an old man with a stick. Yes. No, the Quran doesn't portray Moses like that. The Quran portrays somebody like he's a young gentleman, very smart, very intelligent, and that he's got some form of technology, and that he confronts Pharaoh and all his military leaders and all his scientists, and that they have a confrontation. They have a confrontation, and then Moses defeats them all. Yeah, that's how the Quran portrays these people. It's totally different. It's totally different. That when you actually have a look at it, you'll think, oh my God, I can't imagine that. I can imagine that if the world becomes a digital dictatorship in the future, let's say, like there's countries like China, North Korea, and Iran, where they've got dictatorships. We are not like a dictatorship in the West. Most people think we are. Yeah, there is, the rogue politician, the rogue businessman who are trying to do their own agendas, etc. Yes, there is. But we're nothing like China. Yeah, there's many people who are saying right now there's a conspiracy to bring out electronic currency. They're going to dominate us. Hey, in China, they're already doing that. If you go and live there, it's not the end of the world. Yeah, but here, if they brought it out, they might bring it out, but I doubt it will become a dictatorship like it is in, let's say, in other parts of the world.
Well, it's an
But
interesting
anyway,
idea, like to think that we could be choosing, like you've said, like this is a choice between a God, quote unquote, led society of Sharia or a man-created democracy
okay,
which allows for pedophilia, perhaps if people discuss it. I mean, all rights can be removed by discussion. So I mean, there's flaws to both of them, and
yeah,
it weighs
there's
on
flaws to
us.
both. Right, the word Sharia has got nothing to do with the Quran. That is to do with the Talmud. I'll explain to you now. There's the Talmud sets out Jewish law, and the Muslims have a new book, yeah, which is or new books like the Talmud, and those books there's evidence that Fomenko presents and other researchers to show, especially researchers in France, I've forgotten their names, yeah, and these French researchers have shown lots of evidence. I had a look at it. I've confirmed it myself. That the evidence shows that British Empire companies and French Empire companies and from Holland, they deliberately created the Sharia in Islamic places. The Sharia. It's because what they wanted to do was create, different factions. So they created different factions of Sharia. It's because the war with Tataria wasn't over in the 1860s. The resistance had survived. So it was like an ongoing war. Yeah, like many people are saying, hey, were many buildings deliberately destroyed during the wars, in the so-called American Civil Wars and the fires? The war was continuing. Now, what people don't realize is that, hey, if the Quran is the document for the old world order, the way to destroy that book is to make sure that people don't realize what law is in the Quran and differentiate it between what is Sharia. Sharia is the new Islam. That's why in my books I write down original Islam. Now, if you open up the Quran, yeah, the Quran practically has very little law within it. Very little. Yeah? Yeah, I come to think of it, yeah. I actually, the
There's
thing is,
there's some bits
it's
about
because
how he
I've
should
not
drink
read.
date milk. I like the Quran has things on how he loves goat's milk and dates. I mean, there's a lot of really positive, interesting, fun things in the Quran. It's not all just
Right,
telling people how to live
when
their
we look
lives
at the Quran,
negatively.
we've got to be careful. Like some people say drinking is banished in the Quran. But if you actually have a look at the original Arabic, other researchers will clearly say,
Getting drunk, yeah.
no,
It says you shouldn't
it
get
just says
belligerent.
don't get drunk.
Don't get
Yes,
belligerently drunk. Don't lose
yeah,
control. I think
yes.
Rumi
Oh,
really
yes,
worked on
sorry.
explaining that.
Yeah. All right. So, yeah, so I can see you've had a look at it. Yeah. It's because,
I try to play coy because it's important to like have you expand upon these concepts, and
yeah,
even still, even if
yeah,
I've looked at it, you've probably looked at it in a way I haven't clearly. So it's
yeah.
very useful
Well,
to have
anyway,
these
the
ideas.
Quran, we're seeing it from the Western point of view. The Quran is more global than Christianity. Christianity is more in the West.
One of the things
Buddhism's
I
in the
noticed
East.
with the Quran is it doesn't really present original sin the way that Adam and Eve are
Oh,
kind
yeah,
of
there is
tricked
no original sin.
because they're naive
It, it,
to it, so they're tricked to it, and it's kind of an interesting thing. Where does original sin come from? That's not
uh,
an originally Christian concept, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
the original sin is written in the Old Testament, which has obviously been,
like you said, probably
played around with.
a new thing. And looking at
Yeah,
atonement law,
but
atonement
original sin is now in modern Islam in
right,
some groups.
which is like you're saying with
They've brought it
Sharia.
in. Yeah,
So
they're bringing it in.
So if the new versions of religion are all about this atonement law, and that's what they're saying is that Jesus dying is your atonement. It's a shepherd instead of a sheep. It's a big win in atonement. So you sacrifice the shepherd. It's immortal. It's past, present, future
Yeah.
sacrifice. It's the best deal
Okay,
for
there were
you.
reasons why they did that. Now, I want you to imagine now, half the world has depression, how many millions of people on antidepressants, or they drink for the sake of not to feel their depression. Some people take drugs. There's that much depression, that much worry, that much everything. So people are just worried about dying and what's going to happen to them. So they thought, hey, let's
The
make it easy for these people. Just tell them, you've been forgiven and everything. Don't worry about anything. Christ died for your sins. It's all okay.
Well, then why do
Simple.
they tell the Buddhists that life is suffering? What's up with that? Like,
Right.
what?
It depends which group of Buddhism. Now, if imagine if you went to Thailand, the Buddhism in Thailand is different from the Buddhism in China. It depends on like the Islam in Iran and the Islam in Saudi Arabia is totally different, and then the Islam that's in Syria is different from the ones in Egypt. They're all different, believe it or not. And the one
The
in
Indonesian one
Egypt,
is the Indonesian Islam is insanely different. It's like a tropical
yeah, it is.
tropical coconut house music version. It's
But
great.
but now in all these areas, these modern, Talmudic type of books that they call Sharia books are now entering all the world. They're getting everywhere. Now in a place like in Malaysia, it's not got there very far yet, but there's always the danger. You know, in the Balkans, it's becoming a mess. Half the people now in the Balkans have got these books after the collapse of Yugoslavia, or before that, in the Balkans it wasn't there, but now it's spreading very fast over there. That God knows the future of that region. Yeah, in southern Russia, it was spreading. Putin made sure he put an end to that. But the main thing is anyway, we're talking about. I'll leave you at the final point because I'm going to have to get off. Yeah, the final thing is there is other civilizations in the timeline of history. You could find it. Yeah, the Arabic Quran. I'm saying the word Arabic so that then you will actually look at the Arabic and then check the English words. If you're ever going to read through it, you'll have to really check through it. Because the translations are no good. It does give you a timeline. It mentions the true history of who the other nations were before you. Yeah, but now the question is, does that mean that they are actually from the good side or the bad side? I don't know. That I
Before
don't
you
know. The
before
bottom
you
line, I don't
before
know.
you try to jump from there, I got one question. I got one. All right,
Yeah.
and then you can do it because I know you've been. It's amazing, and I hope you come back. But here's the thing. I think this is something important for the foundation of this. If all of this, if you're saying atonement law is taken over this whole idea, and that's coming from Talmudic law, and it's coming from Abraham's son Isaac and Esau. What is that relationship to the building of atonement, of sacrificing the son or not for God, and the beginning of it all? Is that the key, you think, maybe to? Um,
Okay, now about the sacrificing of Abraham and his son. Now, different religions, different documents say this in a different way. Now, the thing is, whichever document you read, you'll see it. You could see it from that point of view. That some people would say, "Hey, it's evil." Other people would say, "Oh no, God is the king." You know, that's how some people would say it and say, "Hey, I've got to obey His command." Now, somebody else will say, "Oh my God, that is sick," which is which is true up to a certain extent. So it depends on your point of view. Yeah, it's like it depends what nation you are from and or what your point of view is. Now the thing is, because there's different versions of the story, you'll judge it from that point of view. And the other thing is, some people will say the old world order is very suspicious, that only the descendants of Abraham, only they were chosen, only them, that they were chosen so that they will be, the resistance people and the rulers. That if anybody else wanted to rule or be in the resistance, nobody else was allowed unless if it was from that bloodline. Now that was it was something that if you're from the New World Order, you will say that is suspicious.
yeah,
Yes?
what's up with the
But,
bloodline of Esau and Ishmael as opposed to Isaac and Jacob?
okay, right. The thing is now, because now the Quran actually states that every single resistance person, or what they call, prophet, the word prophet is a difficult word, deliberately created to, make you think prophet means somebody who prophesizes, imagines things, and etc. No, they were actually resistance people against rulers who were supposedly tyrants. They were fighting against them, fighting against their Hitlers or Saddam Husseins. I'm not going to get into it. If some people now talking about was Hitler a tyrant or not, that's a totally different subject. Yeah, but I'm saying from from what we've been told in our history, Hitler was a tyrant, and then the person who'd be fighting him would be the resistance. But no, when it comes to the history, they've decided to call these people mysteriously prophets. In other words, that you will think, hey, they were mysterious, strange people. That's what they want you to think, like a Gandalf, somebody, a little insane, etc. Yeah, who've got strange powers from strange places. Gandalf, like in The Hobbit, or what's that other thing? By Tolkien, Lord of the
Lord of the
Rings.
Rings.
So, yeah. So that's what they want you to think. So they've deliberately misguided everybody. But yes, the old world order is suspicious because, well, according to the Quran, it states that all these people actually came from the house of the bloodline of Israel. That includes this Muhammad. Now, according to the Sharia, oh, no, 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 he wasn't from the house of Israel. Now you can see what's happened. That the Quran says one story, and then this new, modern Islam states that, oh no, he's not from amongst those descendants, he's from Ishmael. Now, whether Ishmael existed or not is a totally different story. Yeah, but the Quran states that he was from the same family. Yes, but no, who's going to look in the Quran and bother to read it and then, investigate? But if you do, you'll turn around and think, oh my God, he's from the same family. But why do Muslims say he's not? It's because they've got these new books. Whoever made these new books was deliberately out there trying to do anything. Yeah, ancient Egypt was created with all these monuments, etc., to make sure it goes against one sentence in the Quran where it says that all the buildings were destroyed. But today they're there, so it means they weren't destroyed. But most people don't realize they were just built out of thin air. So the thing is, you can actually see that there is a war against this book. This book is the Old World Order book. Why was it memorized? Yeah, because they could see that the Old World Order was falling. So they memorized it. But the thing is, it comes down to the final bit. Yeah, is the Old World Order correct, or are they evil? Because the ruling family was one ruling family. The resistance was from that same family. Yes. And they claimed that they were chosen and selected by God, by heaven. Whereas the New World Order, the ruling people, from what we are told, some people will dispute it and say, oh no, Madonna, Brad Pitt, George Bush, Obama, they're all related. Some people will claim, yeah, and they'll try to show, historical family links. Yeah, which can't be proven, but that's what they will try and show you. And they'll say the New World Order is also ruled by a few bloodlines and a few families. But the Old World Order makes it clear, in the Quran, they're from that one family. So, but in the New World Order, we can see that, there are people who are getting into government positions who are not from the family, or whatever this family is supposed to be. So some people will say the New World Order is better. Because I don't know which world order is better or correct, yeah? From what I could see, I live in England. It's a beautiful place. Poor people get looked after. Yeah, and if poor people are going to complain over here and say, we get hardly anything, they should just go to live somewhere like, Mexico or Brazil, and then they will know what real hardship is. The government pays their rent here, their gas, electric, water, everything. So I think that, hey, if people are going to complain against the New World Order, it's looked after them. Yeah, there are conspiracies. Oh, they're giving us vaccinations. They did that in the past. They've done this. They've done that. That doesn't mean it's the world order. That means it's a corporation or some group of people, etc., here and there who have done things. Or so far, yeah, it doesn't look that bad compared to if you went to the other side of the world. Like if you've lived in China for the last 50 to 100 years, you would really know what is a dictatorship full of conspiracies and full of control and full of vaccines and other things and other diseases where millions have died and disappeared, etc., from government programs.
Nevertheless, though, right now the world is quarantined, and that is kind of a weird thing for everyone. I mean, the whole world, like Britain, you're not supposed to have gatherings. I think Germany at least
Right,
said over two.
right, okay.
What's going on with Corona and COVID?
Okay, right. If you want to know what's going on with that, now the thing is, in the Quran, I'm not talking about modern Islam. Modern Islam claims that Satan is supposed to be a genie or a spirit. That's what most modern Muslims say. But the Quran, it actually says Satan was an angel. Yeah? Now, the thing is, Satan was an angel, but the Quran actually says something else that's strange. People ask, what is hellfire? And the Quran turns around and says this. Yeah, it uses digital mathematics. It's in chapter 74 of the Quran. 74 is July is the seventh month and 4th of July, 74, Independence Day. The word God, if you go to any Jewish synagogue in the United States, they will never write the word God in a sentence. They will put G underscore the letter D. G is the seventh letter, D is the fourth letter. In other words, it's 74. Muhammad, the way it's spelt in the Oxford English Dictionary, yeah, it's spelt so that the simple gematria for the English alphabet is 74. Yes, it's been done like that on purpose to choose the number 74. So looking in chapter 74 in the Quran, it tells you about angels and hellfire. It says as you enter hellfire, yeah, you know, you'll find right above there, right there, you'll find the number 19. Yeah, it just says that in the Quran. And then it says, people are going to ask, what is this 19? And it says, God's put a number to it. It's something to do with an angel. I've not got to the bottom of the meaning of this yet. I've read it so many times. Yeah, and it uses the word angel with it. Well, anyway, yeah, as you've noticed, this virus is called number 19. Yes, have you noticed this?
Oh yeah, of course, of course. It's crazy. Yeah, number 19.
Yeah, and it's the second biggest global disaster after what happened 19 years ago with the Twin Towers. Oh, the Twin Towers allegedly had 19 people who did the attack. Yes, I think you're beginning to see it. And then
It's a
what
solid
many
sync.
people, yeah, and many people are saying this virus 19 has is actually not a virus, but it's been caused by toxins that are being created into your body because of to do with some form of new internet called 5G. Have you heard of that story? I'm sure you have by now.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. Do you believe about the radiation aspects of this? What do you think about
Okay,
that?
okay. Do you know what the thing is? Because the average person looks at 5G. They don't look at 6G or 7G. Oh, because they've not been to,
Right.
very, very modern places.
I use Wi-Fi 6. That was my thing. I switched to Wi-Fi 6 and I felt
Okay,
like that
I'm
was a
not
good
talking
idea.
about just the Wi-Fi. There's more to it than that. Artificial intelligence. A is the number one. I is the ninth letter of the alphabet. They're coming. AI 19. Yes, I think you're beginning to understand.
Also,
Yes,
AI
nine.
AI is means love in Chinese, right? That's a good.
Oh, like when you say it in Chinese, it's not just in Chinese. In Japanese, it's actually the same word, but they add on extra symbols to it in Japanese. Yeah. Now, if you're going to talk about Chinese and Japanese, like you said, hey, there was a lot of Japanese. Like many people don't realize the Japanese language is similar to Turkish, but it's been modified a lot, at the beginning of the last century. They modified it to change it. Yeah, that's why many of the Mayans, couldn't speak modern Japanese, and it's a lot different. But it's practically the same language that people who went there in the 60s who could speak their grandparents' language could actually do that. Now, many of the old Japanese names from the 1930s and 40s, from people's grandparents' names, are exactly the same as Turkish and Arabic names. Now, when I say Turkish and Arabic, I'm saying Turkish first because the Japanese language works in sentence construction exactly like Turkish and like Filipino language, the sentence construction, because the people who created these languages, they played around with the same maths code. Well, anyway, if you look at all the maths codes and everything, you'll figure it out. Yeah, artificial intelligence, there's nothing wrong with it. Artificial intelligence is alive. Yeah, anybody who's it's like anybody who's dealt with internet technology, who understands it and who understands programs, will tell you that we've come to a stage we don't even know how the internet works anymore, how the programs work anymore. But whatever software applications that we make now, it's more about we have to control it. Yeah, like when you mailed doesn't get through, it normally says mail your demon failure, blah blah blah. It's a demon, blah blah blah. But they're using these words on purpose. Now, some people say that internet technology is to do with the devil. One, you know, it doesn't mean it's to do with the devil. It's like you could have a car, but it's your choice if you want to go around, running people over with that car. It doesn't mean the car is bad. Now, artificial intelligence is there, but it depends on who is going to control it. Yes, and who is making it possible. Now, the Quran speaks about artificial intelligence. The Sanskrit Vedas do not. The Tibetan Pali scriptures of Buddhism does not. The Christian scriptures does not. The Sharia scriptures by Imam Bukhari and Tirmidhi for Islam, they're the two names of the books that people call them. There's 4 books. Oh yes, 4 again, like the 4 Gospels. There's 4 Gospels, there's 4 Sharia books. Bukhari, Tirmidhi, Sunan Abu Dawud, and one more, I've forgotten the other one. Yeah, for some reason they chose 4, same like they chose 4 Gospels. Yeah, like the 4 presidents, yeah, or the first 4 great leaders of Islam if you live in the other side of the world. If you lived in the Middle East, everybody is taught there were four great leaders. But anyway, the thing about artificial intelligence is the Quran speaks about it. Now, none of the other religious books, apart from the Hindu Vedas say there was a war long ago, an advanced war, but it doesn't clearly state that people had technology. It's speculation when you try to interpret the Vedas, saying these weapons could be aeroplanes, could be. But the Quran makes it clear, like for example, it says there was King Solomon. It says he flew around. Yeah, it says when he went to visit here, he flew there. Yeah, it's like today we'd open up a newspaper and it will say, oh, Donald Trump took his flight at this time of the day and he arrived in Japan after he flew there this morning. So the Quran is telling you the story. It tells you the story like that. And then it turns around and it tells you that the technology was so advanced that not just for Solomon, that sometimes I tried to think was the old world order so bad, because I tried to think that Solomon didn't hide the technology, that he could communicate with animals, like for example birds. I've noticed that in the Quran he spoke with birds when he was speaking with them, and then he had a speech with the people, like Donald Trump election speech, and he's telling everybody saying, hey, we should be grateful to God because we can all communicate with birds. It means everybody could. It was a shared common technology. Then there is also the story of the Queen of Sheba. The Queen of Sheba is totally different in the Quran compared to what we're told in all other books. It says that Solomon was there and he called forward his scientists and he told them all to come. Let's say NASA, whoever, directors of science, like Donald Trump would do. Like there's the crisis right now. He's talking to many scientists and corporations. Hey, what are we going to do about this virus? Or let's say they want to bring out 6G. Donald Trump will call Google, he'll call Microsoft, everybody, and say, hey, how are you going to improve the technology in our country so that we could defeat our competitors, Europe and China and Japan? So in the same way, Solomon called up his advisors and they brought together scientists. And this is what the Quran says that shocked me. And I'm still in shock by it even today. When I first read it, when I was about age 18. And it states that Solomon, wanted to bring forward the ruler of another land. Let's say, like the president of China. And it was the female ruler of this other land, known as the Queen of Sheba. Now, what he did was that they used teletransportation, or called teleportation. Now, that is more advanced than the internet that we're using. Our internet transmits images and sounds. Yes? So at first we could send sounds by the telephone, 2G, 3G, 4G, sending images, and soon we're going to be sending greater things. Now, Solomon used an advanced form of technology of sending things that they could transport people within 1 second, that you could go from London to New York in 1 second. And that's how fast that it says blinking of an eye. Yeah. And that's what Solomon's, technology people, companies, if there were companies, corporations, or if there were whatever you want to call them, but that's how the Quran says that land was operating. It is totally different from what these other things say. Now, in the other things, there is the Talmud and the Midrash. It tries to, it does talk about some form of technology, but when it does talk about it, it says it in a way like the Vedas, that it's become like mythology. So you can see that somebody has played around with these books. But what they've all failed to play around with is the Arabic Quran, because these people were memorizing it. So that's why they failed to actually change the words within it. Or one thing that the Americans did, yeah, I noticed by 2004 or 5, there was a new version of the Quran being distributed in Iraq as they were bombing all the mosques and everything, and they left behind new versions. But the people clicked on very soon. Yeah, so now you're beginning to see that these wars are not, it's not exactly what you think. Oh, when the Americans during the Soviet times, they were flying over all the villages in Pakistan and Afghanistan, and through their helicopters, they were dropping Sharia books in the Afghan language and in the Pakistan language. They were dropping them from helicopters in every street. Can you believe this?
That's incredible. I mean, the amount of
Yes.
indoctrination and how recently this all happened is just like it's
Yeah.
overwhelming to think about. There's this other kind of
Yes.
primordial Islam that's older and prehistoric
Yes.
essentially
Yes. When Putin
and
mentioned it,
decent.
yeah, Putin talks about it. He says it, and then Western politicians are saying he's talking rubbish, which you can see that they want to make sure that this new Islam that's been here for up to a century, or it's growing in the last 100 years, like in Yugoslavia, it's grown in the last 30, 40 years. It's been so dangerous in Yugoslavia that what has happened there is one of the worst disasters. People cannot go from one neighborhood to another and things like that. And the borders, not just the Islam, but what happened within the Orthodox Christianity in Serbia and the Catholic Christianity in Croatia is going to take decades and generations to heal that, the amount of damage that they've done. Yeah, but Putin talks about this traditional Islam. Now, one of his speeches that you will notice where he mentions this clearly is that they open a mosque. It's called Cathedral Mosque in Moscow. Now, if you opened a mosque in America and called it Cathedral Mosque, you will notice the Muslims of America objecting. Now, the Muslims in Russia didn't, because Putin made sure that they understood what the original meaning of cathedral meant, and then the people turned around and thought, oh no, there's nothing wrong with this word. Yeah, that's why it's called Cathedral Mosque. And then but he gives a speech there at the opening of this building, and he says, hey, we've got to preserve this original Islam that was here. Yeah, we've got to make sure that this original Islam is what comes out there. Yeah, and that's what he says. Yeah, so when he says that, and Angela Merkel didn't go to the opening of the huge mosque that they built in Germany. In fact, the German media, everybody, politicians, they were like, slandering it, and so that the local population won't like it. Yeah, but in Russia, the leader showed an example. Yeah, of what ethnic harmony should be. Yes, of what religious harmony should be. We could say there was a leader like that in America, called Obama. He was very good at speaking now. Yeah, I would say he was a good leader in the way he publicly spoke. Many people disagree with me, but I liked his speech, what he made in Warsaw, even though it was very political
Well, I
against
mean,
Russia.
being a good speaker and dropping a bomb every 8 minutes for 8 years
Yes, yeah,
is.
that's what I meant. I said
I mean,
people would
as far as
disagree.
speakers go, yeah, like Hitler was a really
Yeah,
great
I'm saying he was a
speaker.
good speaker.
Yeah,
I'm not saying
Obama.
anything further than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm saying, but what he said was similar to how Putin was speaking. So now the thing is, both these people say one thing and then they behave in different things. Now the thing is, Putin, what people know about Russia is based on what they read in the Western media. Like most people in the West would think, for example, that if you are against gays and lesbians, then you will say, hey, I don't mind. But other people in the gay community will think, in Russia, gays are persecuted. That's how people would see it. No, it's not true. I've been all over Russia. I've seen there's gender bars there, all kinds of things in Moscow. I didn't see any types of attacks or anything happening. Now in my city in Manchester, in the centre, they have the the gender places for, they call it gay village. Yeah, and I noticed that if some of these people went to the suburban areas, they would feel a lot of prejudice. Now, if somebody says, hey, you would feel that in many Russian rural areas too. Yeah, it's the same in England. It's the same in America. In some rural places or suburban areas, that if there's going to be some people, from who are gay or these gender things, they probably could get attacked, depending where they go and who they bump into. So, the only thing that Putin did was he said, "Hey, we're going to have, if you're going to have Islam, we'll stick to the basics and what could be proven." Yes, so that we're not going to go beyond this. We don't. We want the public to live in harmony. If you're gay, if you're like this, you've got your thing. You've got the freedom to go around. You've got the gay bars. You've got this. Everything's okay. Now, if you're a Christian, you're a Jehovah's Witness, you've got your belief, but you are not going to be stood there with a Watchtower magazine giving them out in public, or you are not going to be stood there with what do you call it? Gay parades with gay parade flags and magazines giving them out. Yeah, or you are not going to be stood there with your Sharia law flag and your Sharia law books. Now, that is what he said. Now, because he said that, if you go to Turkey, they'll say, oh, he's against Islam. Now, if you go to America, they'll say, oh, he's against the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormons, he's banned them. Now, if you're in Europe, in Manchester, in gay villages, they'll say, oh, the Russians, they hate gays, they've banned them, blah, blah, blah. It's not that they've done that. They've just said, don't propagate. Yeah? Don't, because it could be, propaganda. Yeah, so that's what they've said. They said what you want to believe in, what you want to do, it's your choice. Yes, but we're going to stick to a few basic truths and a few simple things. So that's how they've done it in Russia. And it looks like Russia is heading back towards this so-called old world order that they're discussing, should marriage be something under God, or should it just be a piece of paper, like just a relationship and two people just sign it? So, we can see the way Russia's going. But then again, I don't know, where the future will be. Well, anyway, let's leave everything at that. Any more questions?
No, that was absolutely beautiful. I was going to say thanks a lot for extending that for the last, extra bit. I know it asked more than one question, but there's a lot of stuff there I felt like was really good. So I really appreciate it, and I appreciate your time.
Yeah. Yeah, I tried my best not to give opinions. Anything that I've said,
it's
done my
cool.
best to
It's cool when you
sources.
do, because you're very limited with them, but you've also very strongly expressed when you have, and like in general, you've done everything you can to give as much information so others can make their own and invite other people to check out this other thing that's like everyone has a different way of looking at it, and they haven't really like inspected it themselves.
Yeah, that's why I don't want to give my opinion on which side is correct, the old world order or the new, because people have to make their own opinion up. I don't know that. If I did know, then I will say, hey, I know the answer. But because I don't know, so I'm not going to say, choose this side or that side. I don't want to give an opinion like, many of these people who are making their videos are saying, hey, this is the proof that, they are against the Bible. There's many of these people who are trying to promote the Bible with history, that they're trying to show that it's to do with God and with Jesus Christ.
It seems like neither of the side is perfect. It's like you're driving a train down a track and you can veer it into the baby or the mother. Like neither one is a really great deal.
That's because we don't have enough information.
There should be a third option, which is like between his and hers.
It might not be that. Yeah, I thought. Yeah, there might be a third option. I'm thinking that, but the main thing is it's not either side because we don't have enough information. There's a lack of information because whoever it is has made sure
they burned so much of it. They burned Hobbes, they burned Lao Tzu, they burned so much of Muhammad, they burned Jesus has nothing he wrote down. So what are you supposed to even do other than try to like piece it together? But it's an interesting idea, this sort of like Taoist Islam, this bliss and harmony instead of submission based concept. And so it seems like there could be something there, and it's definitely something people should be more looking at deeper. It's
Quranic Islam is not like what anybody would think it is. It turns around and says that if somebody has their own belief, that they can have their own way, that they should have their own way, that you are not allowed to force an opinion onto somebody or something. But Sharia law states that, oh no, you're a Muslim, even a Muslim has to pray. If you don't, he's going to be punished.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
weird. It seems like it went from being
it's the opposite.
A Hindu thing into being a Talmudic thing.
Yeah,
Like it seems very clear that there's a
yeah,
transition. I hope that sometime
yeah.
soon you have time we can do some more because it'd be great to talk also about Talmudic law and about things in the Old Testament. I love going into
Oh,
some of these
Talmudic law,
families.
you might not believe it. Talmudic law is 99% word for word exactly the same as the Sharia books. It's obvious that somebody's just copied them. I'm not joking to you. Except in the Talmud, it will turn around and say, Moses said this. In the Sharia books, it will say, Muhammad said this. I'm not joking. You will
Yeah,
turn around and
it's
think, I
we
cannot believe it. It's word for word. Yes.
we need to do something on these characters a little deeper, looking into Muhammad and Moses and Isaac and Ish and Esau and Ishmael and Jacob. I think it's crazy. Like also just the idea that Abraham was a guy who made idols and then he decided to worship Allah, a god that did, or someone who did not want any idol for themselves. Like everything from that seems to be this origin story for this atonement thing, and that's where they're getting at. They're
Yeah.
like somebody has to
Right.
die,
You know,
and like that's kind of
right.
weird.
When you use the English language. Now, if you're in England, they are in America. England, America, same place to me because of this language. They use the word worship. Now, the word worship, that word has been designed on purpose to confuse people. Say they worship these gods, blah, 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 because they want to confuse you and make you blind towards what worship really means. The word worship just means you like something, you adore something, you like it a lot. So it's not good to use the word worship.
Well,
It
there's
means that you
I've
like
heard
something a lot.
I've heard the etymology is that it's a worthy gift. It's like when you present something a worthy gift, you're worshiping it. That's a better thing
That's
than
what
just
they've done. They've
adoration.
made you confused
Adoration.
it. Yeah, all it is like, let's say if you're in England and you support Manchester United. Now, the newspaper would say, the worshipping fans of Manchester United today got violent. For example, the newspaper report would say, worshipping just means the people who like something a lot. That it means that you like something and you're not going to compromise with it.
So
It's and then
what is the purpose then? I mean, like the idea of attribution, like Cain and Abel are giving worship by presenting a sacrifice of their fruit or their lambs that they've killed, slaughtered.
right,
What's the
okay, now,
sacrifice if not atonement
right. When
worship?
you're going to mention that, we'll have to talk about you're mentioning these stories. So because you're mentioning them, a lot of them are based on what the Bible has been saying. Yes, you have to think that imagine right now, imagine you're from, let's say, Mongolia. You've never heard of such stories. Imagine you're from North Korea, where there's no Christianity. You haven't heard of these things. Imagine if you're from, in a village in South Japan, somewhere where Christianity and these concepts have never entered your head. So because of these concepts and these ideas, yeah, like the way to worship and these so-called things, events that are in the Bible, like Cain and Abel, or let's say Adam and Eve, that's a perfect example. In the Bible, it says, hey, it's like a twisted story that you've got to guess what happened. They went towards the tree, yeah? They went towards the tree, or Moses saw the burning bush. Um, Actually, some people have given their explanations for this. It's their explanation, but they turn around and practically say Adam and Eve they were happy in the garden because they were innocent. Yeah? And then came the snake. Some people say the snake was the penis. And then they say there was the apple. And the apple, they say, is the tip of the penis. And they say that, Eve ate the apple first, in other words, inserted it went into a vagina. And the tree, some people say, is the actual vaginal hair as the representation, some people say, yeah, on the other side. So what they practically mean is that, hey, afterwards it says, they realized they were naked, yeah, and they covered themselves hiding from God because they just had sex. And then heaven disappeared because now Adam and Eve did something new. They became like God. just like Satan said they would be. They created a child. And before that child, God taught Adam, according to the Old Testament, God taught Adam and Eve language and the names of every single thing in the world. Practically taught them, same like school. They learnt everything. But now Adam and Eve had the next problem. They created somebody. Yes? They created somebody and they had to teach that person every single thing. And if they fail, Cain and Abel, one of them killed each other. In other words, they failed to give that correct education. But they became like God. They became wise. That they thought, shit, we just created somebody and we've got to teach them everything. We've got to be responsible. Or before that, life was like, hey, it's so cool. You will notice that in anybody who's had a child. That you can meet some people on the street and the way they talk, and you can even feel if somebody's had a child because you will know the seriousness in their behavior or non-seriousness. So, some of these stories may not be what they seem, the way they've been written. They might not be what they seem. Like I said, Moses and the burning bush. Some people say that Moses' staff, the stick, he put it into the water separated. The water was vaginal water, and the River Nile and its tributaries are like the shape of a vagina, and the burning bush was like, a vagina that's on fire. You will not believe, what the interpretation could be.
It fits perfectly with some of these, like, the Highlanders and like the pagan rites, like the Maypole and the Wicker Man, and yeah, I mean, like the phallus and the vaginal fruiting and blossoming, and it seems like it's reminiscent of all 20th century pop culture too. So I go with it.
Yeah. So as you noticed, there's too much. I'm trying my best not to laugh while saying these stories, but it's actually even worse. So the thing is, what I'm saying is, like you said, there might be there might be a third side. I think, yes, this is an example of a third side. Yes. So the truth is, I can state to you, yeah, what I've got is a lot of knowledge. I studied a lot. But if somebody's going to ask me the bottom line question, which side is right, which is wrong, where did we come from, where are we going, etc., who made us, that I don't know. And many of these people who've got their videos and everything, I really can't stand them because they're trying to push their agenda. Either it's Christianity, or it's some form of politics, or it's, the return of Christ. Or I've not seen many Muslims do these videos yet. It's because Muslims are not interested in it because they
already did these videos. They already did these videos like 20 years ago. I mean, like, we already had a wave of Islam in America that was really interesting.
Oh, no, I'm not talking about the Islam videos. Yeah. There's them all the time. Yeah.
Not just the violent. And in 2001 they became really violent and crazy propaganda films. But before that, there was actually like a number of kids that were really interested in Islam in the 90s. I mean, because of black hip hop musicians that were involved, and a lot of this evolved naturally in California, places like Oakland, where you had after Muhammad Ali, Cassius Clay, and Malcolm X.
After they became Muslim.
People started getting interested in it.
Okay, yes. So as you'll notice in the United States, after Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X, Islam came out. At the same time, mysteriously, in America, a parallel crazy form of Islam came out called Nation of Islam. Yes, and that dominated the black community more than mainstream Islam.
Isn't it interesting that there's a violent kind of Islam and it came right at the same time as the peaceful Islam that the African Americans were introducing in pop culture, and they were taken out?
So as you can see, there's many people who are involved. Everybody knows that during the civil rights movement that the Russians were involved a lot, that they wanted to see the separation of the United States, and the Black Civil Rights Movement. If Kennedy did not give, allow them to go to the schools and everything else, and segregation continued, can you imagine what could have happened to the United States if the Russians armed these people? Yes, gave them, huge amounts of ammunition and weapons. So what we're looking at, it could have turned dangerous. Now, there is the other thing is, if they carried on in what they were doing in segregation and things like that, then, there is the other thing. Hey, it's called oppression to some people and racism. But I'm saying, the politics in that, there were so many forces that were involved. Che Guevara was involved, Fidel Castro was involved, Yasser Arafat, Gamal Abdel Nasser was going to support Malcolm X in the United Nations, but they got rid of him. There was so many things going on. So in the same way that we cannot even figure out what happened in the 60s, trying to figure out what happened a few centuries ago is going to be a lot more harder. But many people are studying history because they want to know the bottom line. Is there a God? Isn't there? Did God make us? Did God not make us? Now, from what it looks like, from all the research, now if you're going to ask me for an opinion now, from what it looks like, it actually looks like the New World Order is doing everything to destroy the order of heaven. That was called Alten Order in the old language. Yeah? They're trying everything to destroy it. Yeah? And they've not managed to fully destroy it. It's not game over. And I've noticed that the only document that survived from this old world order is the book called the Quran. Now, many people are claiming that the Quran is the word of Muhammad. Some say it's the word of an angel. Some say it's the word of God. There are actually researchers who say that the Quran was written by King Solomon. This is something else. That's another long subject. So I won't go into that right now. That's what some researchers are saying, especially in Western Europe. Yeah, that they say the Quran is the canon. Yeah, the canon. That's why they say that Allah has been canonized. Yeah, and that's where the word Quran and canon, they were originally the same word, and they say that that's what it was. Like Allah and the Quran, or the law and the canon. Yeah, when you look at language, you can figure it out. But the main thing is, in my final opinion, what it looks like, but I could be wrong, yeah, is that a creator created this place where we are in right now. We've got a limited number of years here. We could increase it because of technology up to a few hundred years, maybe beyond that, depending on what level of achievement we get to with technology. We could lengthen it, but we are going to go. And it's correct, yeah, that if somebody has done something bad to you, you will want justice. And it's normal to say, hey, I hope that there is a day after I die that, God's going to get this guy. That's why the Quran doesn't say you should know. The Quran actually says that, it says that God wants you to believe. It doesn't say you will know. There's a difference. It says God wants you to believe that there will be a day that will be called the Day of Judgment or the Day of Justice. And people who have done something wrong against you and they think they got away with it, they will face justice on that day. So don't worry. So that's the reassurance it gives you. Yeah. No other religion actually states that to you clearly. Open up all these books, they don't make it clear. In that book, in the Quran, it's almost like a complete book, like a complete guidebook for humans while we're here. It says, hey, you're going to have difficulties while you're here. This will happen, that will happen. And then when it says, hey, if this happens, this is how to behave in that situation. It doesn't have so many religious laws as people claim they do. All these laws were made in these Sharia books. Same like Judaism doesn't have any laws apart from in the Talmud. Now the Old Testament has already been played around with. The maths code shows it. That it's been played around with, and so have the Vedas and everything else. So they've been played around with. But the bottom line is, the Quran looks like, in my opinion, to be a guidance book. That's what it looks like. It's a simple book. It tells you this, it tells you that. It doesn't say about the violent thing. Those have been mistranslated on purpose. It talks about in the situation where these so-called prophets or resistance people, while they were fighting, yes, and while they were on the run, yeah, from the dictatorship state, if those people who were sent to kill you, if you get hold of them first, then you should kill them. It's almost like a James Bond scenario, the way it describes that. I've read that. Now, that is what modern media claim that, hey, this is a book of violence. But I've just shown you an example of a modern situation where James Bond is trying to avoid, another state, and and he's got no choice. He's got to kill them first before they kill him. So the type of people who we're talking about, these messengers and these people, they were not just, people with their sheep and old men with sticks walking around the way as has been portrayed by these global religions like Hinduism, Christianity, and Buddhism. The Quran actually states that these people were fighting against tyranny and oppression. They were freedom fighters, and it goes into their story like that they had to go and face these dictators, and they challenged them, yes, with technology. They challenged them technologically, and they claimed that they got their technology from the creator. That's why these freedom fighters, normally they won, yes, but on other occasions they did lose too. It was like an ongoing war for centuries. That's the bottom line of what the Quran is. Anyway, I'm going to go.
That was beautiful. Thanks so much for taking that time.
Excerpts.